Before we...
Oh, we've started.
Okay, I'm gonna take a quick pic of us.
Okay. Hello.
Hello. Okay, there we go.
Right. So, welcome. It's Kathy Frey here, and welcome to IMCO and this week's Maternity Natural Health webinar. And we've got the divine Chantal back. Have a good big wave, Chantal.
Hello, everybody. It's such an honor to be back, Kathy. Hello, everybody. It's so good to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you back, and we've got you back because there was kind of unfinished questions a little bit last time, and there's just, you've got so much information and we want to glean off you. So just a little bit of housekeeping for those of you who are signing in. If you are a little bit new, we'd love you to go into the chat section and let us know whereabouts you are in the world and what your health professional role is, or maybe you're a mum having expecting a baby. That's wonderful. And also just a reminder that down the bottom is the Q&A button. So if you have any questions for Chantal, please do write them in there, and we'll absolutely make sure we cover them off today. So that is wonderful. But just to give a little, I'm just fiddling around here with my
While you fiddle, I'll say
on my computer. I usually
everyone,
have, I usually operate between two screens and my webcam's not working. So today I'm on my laptop. So anyway, that's all right. First world problem. Okay, so yeah, so Chantal, it's just great to have you back. She's in New York, so it's been quite a bit of a challenging year for the past year now, and she can tell you more about herself. But Chantal is a women's health coach, a doula, a childbirth educator, a yoga teacher, and pushing power, talking about that second stage of labour. So when we talk about labour, there's labour and birth. So really, labour is the dilatation of the cervix, birth is the pushing out of the baby. And so that second stage of it, which is the pushing out of the baby, is a particular specialty topic of Chantal's. And so, yeah, due to popular demand, we've got you back. And I've got a few questions myself that we want to maybe sort of get the ball rolling, because today's format is just going to be a little bit of a free flow conversation. So if I can just get to my little notes about my questions that I had. Sorry, everybody. Usually I'm a little bit more efficient. All right, so let's start at the beginning. For those of you who may not have met Chantal before, so tell us firstly what inspired you to begin educating people around pushing safely and effectively and protecting the perineum for birth.
Yeah, so again, it's just so thrilling to be here again with you, Kathy. It's just always a pleasure. So thanks for inviting me back. Yeah, so second stage of labor. I'm so passionate about pelvic health for birth. And I've been a doula for 21 years, active doula assisting births all over New York metro area. And, you know, I come from a background, you know, I have different trainings as a doula and as childbirth educators. And no one ever really spoke about the pelvic floor. But the more and more I was going to births, I started noticing that moms were often having a hard time with pushing, often pushing really forcefully into their faces, creating broken blood vessels, broken capillaries, pushing really forcefully into the abdomen, sometimes creating a diastasis, or if they had one, making that worse, or pushing really ineffectively or forcefully into the pelvic floor, and sometimes sustaining unnecessary damage. And the more that I would see this, and I would bring it up with some of the providers that I worked with, and why aren't we helping our mums push more effectively, more efficiently? And the answers I'd often get is that they're going to get it. Like on the day, they'll get it, and you only have to do it once because the next time it's so much easier. But it wasn't always so. Often they push for hours and hours and hours, and sometimes run out of time, and sometimes end up with forceps, vacuum, episiotomy, or sometimes sustain like tearing at the end. Now, there's a certain range of tearing that is normal and common. Like I'm always like, yeah, go for intact perineum, but we want to avoid those third or fourth degrees if possible. And as a yoga teacher, some of my students would share with me, and I've been teaching yoga since 1996, that they who had their children 10, 15 years ago were often experiencing leaking when they jump or sneeze, some type of pelvic pain, or even a prolapse. And when we started digging deeper into those stories, it inevitably went back to their births. And as a women's health coach working in perimenopause and menopause, what I began to realize is as we age and our bodies change, sometimes those obstetric events from the past will catch up with us. And I was like, okay, we've got to prepare moms better, because it's not just the day of, it's our whole lives. Like I want for my clients to be jumping on the trampoline with their grandkids at 65, 75. I don't want them, scared of the bouncy house or never jumping again, or, so this is what's pushed me, if you will,
right.
to create
and you absolutely hit the nail on the head when you say, that's kind of an end goal of being a grandmother that can jump on the trampoline with their grandbaby, after you've had your children all those years later. So, it's an interesting thing that you talk about, preparing for pushing, because that is not something that's really discussed very much at all. I think that there's, it's not so much, well, it's not discussed, but it's also because not a lot of people know what to say. What is the advice? So what do you think are the most important? I know we're skimming, but we've got a bunch of questions. So what do you think is the most important thing to teach about preparing for pushing?
Yeah, so often people say to me, how do I get the baby out of me? Just get this baby out of me. And so, get this baby out of me without pain, without tear. Like that's just what everybody wants, and I get it. But to take the pressure off, how do we change that perspective just a little bit and go, what does the baby need in order to come into the pelvis, through the pelvis, and leave the pelvis? And how does the mom let go to let the baby out? So it's not so much like getting the baby out, but letting the baby out, right? So if we think about how do we let the baby out, often we think about like a strong pelvic floor. And a lot of my clients here in New York City are often very strong pelvic floors. They may have been doing like gymnastics and dance since they were 5, and then horse riding on weekends, and spinning classes and CrossFit. So they are very strong, and that's great. But for letting a baby out, those perineums, that pelvic floor muscles, has to be supple, pliable, be able to lengthen to let the baby out.
Now, I know that you and I have had some real discussions on this topic and I'm sure we'll get into a bit more detail on it, because there is such a kind of, I think, a misunderstanding that having a strong pelvic floor is important and helpful for pushing a baby out. And actually, in my experience, those Pilates instructors and horse riders have some of the most difficult, challenging second stages to push their baby out, because their pelvic floor is so strong. It won't yield to those babies.
Yes.
And so, and I know that we're going to be getting into these topics, but, so certainly one of the things I've always adopted, well, not always, it's more something I adopted, through my practice, through my experience of coming to this conclusion, is that I don't think women should be doing pelvic floor exercises in their last trimester, especially their last 8 weeks. We actually want a soft, relaxed, gentle, yielding pelvic floor, not a super strong, muscular pelvic floor. And But as soon as that baby is born, oh yeah, well no, it's back to doing the pelvic floor exercises. But I know that that's kind of a there's a lot of conversation out there of saying to women that they should be doing pelvic floor exercises right up to the day of their birth. And I just question it. It's not what I see in birthing suite. And so what do you think are, I know you've got some really deep thoughts on this as well, and what are some of the, bigger like misunderstandings, challenges when, clinicians are preparing women for birth? Where do you stand on that?
Well, first of all, I mean, I know our healthcare system isn't really set up for this, but individualized patient care, like person to person, whole mother care, right? So like that intake, like when I work with my clients, I take a solid history. I want to know what they were doing when they were young girls, when they were teenagers, when they were in college as adults. I want to know a little bit about like their nutrition, about their lifestyle, right? We're looking at movement. We're looking at just everything, first of all, just to start. So I know that we can't always have that individualized care. I mean, in an ideal world, that's what we have. But that's a good place to start, to specifically look at like breath and sleep and coordination. And so when we think about the pelvic floor, it's not just isolated. It's really very much a whole core unit that involves, I breathe in diaphragm, strong abdominals, our multifida at the back, and it's managing that intra-abdominal pressure. So yes, we want a supple, yielding, pliable pelvic floor, but also that coordination. And I think people do many different things when they think they like bearing down or letting go or down training. And I'm like you, I'm sure when people think they kind of actually pushing, they're actually really pulling up. So, and then you're just fighting against yourself. So there's two areas that I kind of want to look at, like when we're looking at second stage of labor, because when you're pushing for long periods of time in an uncoordinated way, especially if it's directed pushing and there isn't like the mom isn't feeling pressure or connection, or doesn't make that connection in terms of the coordination of the release of the pelvic floor, that often leads to that fascia weakness, muscle weakness that is associated with like incontinence or even a prolapse. And then when it comes to crowning, then we want the slow birth of the head, a controlled slow birth of the head to prevent those tears. So we're looking at, we're looking at that almost like that passive stage and then the more active participatory part of second stage. So really understanding what is second stage, what is really going on. And I actually added the nice guidelines as an attachment for everybody to see, because I feel like that really lays it out, really the British, the UK guidelines. Yes. It really, really kind of gives you, it really explains second stage. So like everybody thinks, okay, pushing you 10 centimeters, let's go. But where is the baby in the pelvis, right? So we know like our pelvis, the baby, the middle of the pelvis, right, with these ischial spines, these little bony points right here, interestingly enough, that is where the deep muscles of the pelvic floor attach the pelvic diaphragm. They attach around S3, S4 in the sacrum, these ischial spines in the middle of the pubic symphysis, and then the outer tissues, the superficial muscles, attach outside of the pelvis, like the little coccyx, the ischial tuberosities, and then the base of the pubic bone. So when the baby is coming down into the pelvis, and one of the key points, babies have to do a lot of turning and moving and tucking. We can go into all of that if you like, but once it passes through, comes into contact with the pelvic floor muscles and passes through to the lower part of the pelvis, like +1, +2, most moms will feel some type of pressure where they can coordinate even with an epidural. So often waiting. So it often has to do with like knowing what does the baby have to do to come into the pelvis, through the pelvis. And we know that the baby has a lot of kind of tucking and turning to do. So often I feel like the moms are pushing too soon because they know the baby has to tuck and turn and tuck and like flex and flex even more. And then as it comes underneath the pubic symphysis, it then has to begin to extend its head. So if you're pushing when the baby hasn't even extended its head to come slide across the perineum, then you're pushing kind of before the baby's really ready. So we kind of want to wait for the baby to kind of come onto the perineum, and you start beginning to see some of the baby's head, because that's when it will begin to stretch out the perineum, extend its head before it, crowns and births. So there's lots of layers, and I think just one, understanding the physiological movements of both the mom and the baby, but the baby's intrinsic movements that it needs to do to come into, through, and leave the pelvis is important.
Absolutely. I've just a couple of questions here. There's one that's come in.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's French. So I don't speak French, but if you could type your question in English, that would be great. And also, somebody was just asking about your previous session and accessing, being able to watch that. We are in the throes right now of getting a lot of these videos more up onto the IMCO website, and in a more orderly fashion. We're just sort of in the throes of improving the site, and of course, because it's all, there's everything is run by volunteers, so we rely on the of wonderful people doing wonderful things for nothing. And yeah, so that is getting sorted. But if anybody particularly would like to see that other session right now, and you are most welcome to email me, just info@imco.com, and I can give you a temporary link for Chantal's previous video.
Yeah,
and
wonderful.
How would you know if the head, we've got another question here, how would you know if the head is extended? If you are a midwife or an obstetrician, you would know that basically when you're doing an internal exam, we can see what's going on, or feel what's going on.
And also the labia and the pelvis begin to open.
By the way, yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
sorry, there was a little bit
exactly.
of a misloop. Sorry.
And I've got a question here of now, because you're in America and epidurals are so dominant within labours, are you sort of seeing most women with epidurals on? I mean, this makes such a difference. Whereas for me, in my particular practice, I didn't have a lot of women with epidurals. So that sensitivity that women have got for their ability to feel what they need to feel. What's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so well, first of all, I don't have an agenda like with epidural or no epidural. When I teach my push and power classes, I want to teach because I want to teach for everybody. So whether you choose an epidural or not epidural, if you get an epidural and you can't feel, I don't want to, I would hate, I've had people come to my class and say, oh, I wish I got this information before, because I couldn't feel a thing. So then I want you to think what to do to be able to coordinate those muscles to be able to bring the baby down. Once you drive the baby down, the baby's on the perineum, most people will be able to feel some type of sensation, even if it's a big difference between like, or like a little burp. Compare a burp to throwing up involuntarily.
Yes,
like
because depending on how heavy that epidural is that's been cited, what it does is it deadens the pain receptors, but not always the pressure receptors. So women can have, but I just sort of, I guess when women have not had your training and they don't have that information, but
let's go back,
you see a difference?
Yes, let's go back, because it is a very, very important question. I just wanted to say that I don't have a bias. I do feel like this information can get out there. But here in New York City, with a lot of the hospitals having like into the 90s, between 86% to 96% epidural rates, like the epidural rates are high. People hiring doulas are often, not in the 10%. But also, I mean, I'm not exactly sure of the numbers of how many are actually hiring doulas, but yes, so epidural rates are high. And so one thing with an epidural is again, I want to go back to what does the baby need to come into the pelvis, through the pelvis, and out of the pelvis. And there's 2 points I want to make here. Yes, understanding and learning about our pelvis and how to make more space for the baby is really important. Although when it comes to birthing, it's not like a cake recipe. And I think sometimes people get really stuck on certain things. Birth is not linear, like life is not linear. And so really learning, one, to sense the body and ask questions so that you either the midwife or the OB or the nurse can help guide you into positions to help support the baby's movement through the pelvis. But one great thing with an epidural is the laboring down. So if the baby's in a great position, the baby can lower down until it is like practically on the perineum. But if the baby is in a then you want to labor down, right? To push with an epidural, like from -2, -1.
Oh no, yeah, that's crazy. There's certainly quite a practice where there's a desire to have that woman at about +1 before she would be pushing with an epidural, because then she's got such a short distance to go. And so the idea of, I think, different practices occur differently around the world and around different obstetricians and different hospitals and things, but certainly what I'm more familiar with is the practice that once that woman is fully dilated, if she does have an epidural on, just give her another hour or two of descent before she will start pushing, so she is at +1. At that point, that means that there's just a better chance that she's going to be able to birth that baby without needing instrumental assistance. For those of you who are mother-to-bees that are watching us and you're going, what's all this minus and plus and things going on? Do you want to hold up the pelvis? Yeah.
Yeah,
so
I'll
those
hold up the pelvis, but I
ischials.
also I'll just give you a quick illustration. So before the
Oh,
baby
wonderful. There we go. So
before the baby comes into the, you can explain it if you want, Kathy. But as the baby before it comes into the inlet of the pelvis, it's still floating. We say like high up in the sky. The ischial spines are here. That's the middle of the
when
pelvis.
the baby's That's right. When the baby's top of their head reaches the ischial spines, that's what we call 0. And if the baby's, once the baby descends further, it becomes +1 and then +2. And at +2, we're seeing peeps of baby's head, and at +3, well, we're seeing a whole lot of baby's head. So that's what we're talking about there, and that's how when women have their vaginal exams during labor and when they're pushing, that's the point that the midwives or the obstetrician is not just interested in what dilatation the cervix is. It's also all about the descent, how far down in that pelvis the baby is, and also its lie and its head flexion. So we can tell the head flexion by its fontanelles, and how well flexed it is can tell us. Yes, so there we go. Fantastic. So when we do a vaginal exam and we can feel that wonderful big fontanelle at the back there, then we know that that baby's head is well flexed. Whereas if we say, for example, feeling the fontanelle at the front, then we know the baby is not flexed as well. So that's sort of how that's all told. That's oversimplifying it, but they're good. Now, what else have we got in questions here?
But just to go back to those questions, because I see often like floating around the internet, like certain positions. So I'll give one position where I feel like people often get stuck, and I'd love your thoughts, Kathy. So I'm just gonna pull up this table, for example. So often I'll see like I think the baby, it's important to understand like the positions. I'm seeing this a lot with this position. Now look at this W over here. So I think that the internal rotation and the external rotation, but here in the West, in New York City, a lot of moms are not able to get into deep squats, and we don't really even encourage kids to sit in a W position. So I think we have to often think like, yes, the internal and external rotation, we can explore that all together for a moment, but you also have to use your common sense, because when you're pushing in that position, it's really, really hard on the knees with the shins out to the side. You, with all the relaxing in the body, my like meniscal muscles just looking at that kind of hurt. I mean, we want, yes, space for the sacrum to move out of the way and the sit bones to broaden, but like there is this like power of moving the baby down. So I mean, take care of your knees. I think certainly in a sideline position, or if you are on your back, to be able to do an internal rotation. But when you're on hands and knees and there's actually pressure and force on your knees, just like be careful of that a little bit. And there's so many things going on. There's not only the bones that the baby has to pass through, there's also ligaments and muscles and fascia. And that's what we want to think about releasing as well. It's not only the bones of the pelvis. There's, you know, we have like our deep psoas muscles, we have our round ligament, our broad ligament, we have like the bladder, the rectum, the pelvic floor that the baby has to move through. So it's lots and lots of layers. It's not like, so to think of it in a more, in a layer, like layers, it's not so literal, I think, when we work as providers, when we're supporting our moms. Do you know what I mean, Kathy?
Absolutely. And going back to those positions, when it comes to second and third babies, when women have vaginally birthed before, they, especially with thirds, well, they could practically be in whatever position they wanted to be quite often, and that baby will successfully be born. But with first, it is a little bit tougher usually, and so one of the a couple of my personal favorite positions, if well, obviously on hands and knees or on their side in a pool is great, but the pool tends to be something that is very, very helpful during the labor, during the dilating, when the women are not pushing, they are just needing to manage the pain of contractions. And that's where the pool is wonderful. Whether a woman decides after she's fully dilated, whether she's going to stay in the water to physically give birth underwater is kind of a separate topic. I think it should be a separate topic. And, you know, and so often when women will say, oh, I'm really keen to have a water birth, actually what they're really thinking more about is they're keen to have a water labor. Right, but anyway, that's a different topic. But if we go back to just talking about being on the bed or on the floor sort of situation, with the beds, I've a couple of real favorite positions I find are helpful for the woman is firstly when she is starting to do her pushing, is being on her hands and knees but leaning over the headboard of the bed. Yeah,
absolutely. So you have something more like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. Perfect. And you get those knees really, really wide.
Yeah, really wide. But I mean, you have to be wide, but you don't have to take your legs out.
No, yes, not the feet. Not the feet wide. Not the feet wide, the knees wide. Just the hips.
Exactly.
So that's a great position because they can also easily rest in between contractions.
Correct.
You know, because often by the time with the first baby, they've been, you know, by the time they're getting to the point that they're fully dilated and they're pushing, well, goodness, they've already had 2 nights of latent labor overnight where they've, you know, didn't get a lot of sleep, and then they lost a 3rd night on active labor where they had no sleep, and you know, they're tired. It's been a long haul, and sometimes the women are so exhausted in between, you know, you see them kind of leaning over the head, and in between contractions you hear.
That's great. That's great if you can fall asleep in between.
You know, and then the next contraction comes and they get into it again. And so that would be an absolute favorite position for the beginning of pushing,
I love
a
that.
lot of the pushing.
I love that, because when you're in this position, you can also kind of get into a lunge in this position. It's useful. You can be in different positions in that regards. So it's
yeah, and that
the,
and that lunge position you just showed is very good for when the baby's actually starting to get born, when we're actually starting to see some crowning. But one of my other favorite positions, and other midwives that are on here, please, go into the chat and give us your thoughts as well. But one of my other favorite positions, particularly for first time mums, is left lateral. Because they are, number one, they're off their tailbone, so no issue there. Number two, it's a good resting position between the contractions. And number three, it's a fantastic view of the perineum for the midwife.
Yeah,
and
in fact,
so you can really be incredibly helpful on protecting that perineum.
Yeah, I have.
Do you want to just show left lateral?
Yes, I'd love to show left lateral, and I also love to share a story like how it actually can really help. So I'll show you both sides. So left lateral could be, you have a pillow, of course, and you are in this position or in this position like this,
and when
then
you're
from the back, like on your this way, you see that you can really broaden the sit bones.
Yep. And then in between the contractions, you're just dropping that leg down, because while you're having the contractions, one of your support crew is, I would usually get the partner or someone to hold to be putting pressure on that foot, on your right foot. So the mum's got something to be pushing against. It's like that's her wall. And then when the contractions finish, she just flops that leg down and has a good breathe and catches her breath again.
Yeah, that's great. I'll put a pillow there for the next demonstration.
We didn't plan the that's so helpful, I'm sure, for everybody watching. Now I'm just sort of saying what other questions that we had.
I'd love to share a story about that, just because I think it will bring it home too. Like I had a client who was having an unmedicated birth. So she was having an unmedicated birth, and as the baby was like really moving through the vault, the vaginal vault, it was having those head compressions and the baby's heart rate was going down. So, and she was having an unmedicated birth, but she did choose to push in like this kind of position, right? So so her OB said to my client, I know you don't want an episiotomy, but if this baby is not born on the next couple of pushes, I'm gonna have to cut you. I'm really sorry, but this baby really needs to be born. So I said to her OB, who I had a good relationship with, I said, can I have the next couple of pushes with my client? And she was like, yes, sure. How can I help? So I said, come, let's turn her onto her side quickly, just to see if we can give this baby a break. And so my client was like, oh my God, I can't move. I have a bowling ball inside of me. And so we actually like helped pick her up and over. So she was on her side and actually helped to get like more towards her tummy. So she was almost in like this running position. So she's on her left side with this right sit bone up and out of the way, which allowed the sacrum and the tailbone to move back. So she's almost like this way towards the tummy. And on the next contraction, we could see the baby began to rotate. On the next contraction, the baby rotated some more. And on the next contraction, that baby crowned and birthed with an intact perineum. No episiotomy, no cuts, no tears, not a scratch. And that baby was 9 pounds, 10 ounces. So that baby really needed some support just with that final rotation.
That's right.
That's lateral.
And episiotomies, what we're talking about is with that baby descending, is it was the bony issues. It was getting past the bones, and she needed to get off her tailbone, so there was room. And if she stayed in the same position she was in, an episiotomy wasn't particularly going to make perhaps that much difference, except that it makes it more accessible to stick a ventouse on the baby and yank it out. But you know, that woman need, like all women, she needed to just get off her tailbone.
Yeah, get off your back.
Yeah.
And it's not that big of a movement really in that situation. It wasn't that much effort, you know, just for her to kind of just shift positions. But I feel like the baby gives the clues, because some babies are fine on that position. But if the baby gives us a suggestion, then we want to follow the baby's lead, and often change in positions is all it needs.
Yes, and the left lateral is also a great position for the pushing, you know, before you're at the crowning stage too, especially if the woman is feeling particularly tired, or she, you know, maybe she's been on her hands and knees leaning forward for a bit and her knees are feeling a little sore and she just wants a change of position. It's also a great position for pushing before crowning, because it does assist that baby to rotate, and you know, often they just need that little bit of gravity to do that last sort of quarter turn to be, you know, fully anterior. So
I agree, because sometimes all the upright positions, which is great for the first stage of labor, but often when we're already in second stage, it can swell, you know, the cervix, that little room or something that just needs to get out of the way. And that left line lateral, and are peanut balls popular where you are in New Zealand? So
sorry, what did you say?
Like a peanut ball. So if someone's wanting
peanut balls. A lot of people, there's a lot of Swiss balls being used.
Oh, see, like you could do like a left line lateral.
Yeah, that's a fantastic position, and often it just, again, it opens up that pelvis, and a great position when the woman is still dilating to get rid of the last bit of that rim of cervix. Absolutely, yeah. And depending on where people are, they may have a peanut ball, or they may just use a couple of pillows, you know.
Exactly, a couple of pillows is fine. In our hospitals, there are never enough pillows. You have to kind of bring your own. It's New York City. There's like some of my clients don't even get one pillow to start with. I don't know where the pillows go, but
I think that's one of those things. You get one pillow per room. Okay, so what else? Now I do have some other questions here that I wouldn't mind going through, but I don't want to take you off course of other things that you want to discuss. Is there, should I ask some of my other questions?
Yeah, ask some of the other questions, and we'll leave this. I don't know how much time, we don't have much time, but I want to talk a little bit about the coordination, because this is what I think, you know, as providers, or even the moms listening, is I was just at a birth a couple of days ago where my client, and you know, like in the moment, it takes a little bit of practice to find. And yes, the lower the baby comes, the more they're going to connect. But I can give you an example where, and this has happened so many times, is where my client is say push in, and some people have an easier time. And I think the work that you do ahead of time can really, really help. Like if there's any type of pelvic floor practice you're doing, is just learning how to coordinate those muscles and let go of those muscles. So for my client, when she was pushing, she thought she was bearing down, but every time she was actually pushing, she was actually pulling up, like I could see. And I'd be like, I would give her like all these cues to release, and she'd push up. I'd be like, nope, that's the abdomen. And then she'd push, and I'd be like, nope, that's your legs. Or if I'm holding a leg and they're pushing me across the room, I know they're tightening up their pelvic floor. So to really try and relax the legs, because I think with when it comes to letting go, to let the baby out, you want to think of letting go from the navel to the knees, like let the lower bottom part of your body completely relax. So squatting and standing is actually great, but if you're tightening up your pelvic floor, then a side lying or hands and knees may be better. And so often it's kind of connecting to those muscles. So if everybody out there actually just wants to sit on their hands for a moment, and you can put your hands just on the inside of your ischial tuberosities, your sit bone. So you just feel underneath each sit bone, just there for a moment. And here we can do a little experiment, just right in ourselves with our voice, right? So your hands are just on the insides of your sit bones. You feel those bony parts, your fingers are just on the insides. And I would like us all just to hum. I want you to hum low, hum high. Do you notice the difference in your tissues?
Mm-hmm.
Or you can just like you can notice ha 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 ha.
You feel it on there.
Yeah, you feel it. So you want those muscles to be able to release down, not go up. So often what's happening up here is happening down there. So you want to think soft jaw, soft throat, soft tongue. Often I think of like a lake.
Yes. One of the sayings I would say is relaxed face, relax vagina. And
yeah.
So the woman,
exactly.
rather than, yeah.
Yeah, this it actually tightens up everything.
Another thing that I have certainly found, particularly with first-time mums, is that initially when because there is this period of time once the woman is, I have to go back, sorry, and just have a giggle about you using the term unmedicated birth, which is we don't have. Within Australasia, I don't think we use that term very much, and because it's just birth. It's funny. They're always like, oh, okay, unmedicated birth. What was birth? Anyway, it was just I'm just giggling at America on that one.
It's true. It's just birth, but people want a natural birth. But a natural birth here means a vaginal birth, and a natural birth with you means an unmedicated birth. So that's really, it doesn't matter. Birth is birth.
I'm yes, pulling the chain. One of the things that it happens is that when natural birth, when they get to around, a little pushy, and often the midwife will hear it in the sounds that they're making before they even are consciously aware of it. And that can be a really positive sign to us that we're thinking, oh, she's probably about 9 centimeters, we're getting close. And sometimes you might say to somebody, one of the things I would say to women is, look, just, hold off pushing until you feel like you can't not push. Yeah. And when she can't not push, that's usually she's fully dilated and we're good to go. But once she is pushing, there is still a period of time it takes for her body to transition from uncoordinated to coordinated pushing. And quite often it might be like sort of 10 minutes into pushing or something, and woman will be, well, can you see a baby yet? Can you see? Like, well, we haven't even got effective pushing yet. And it's like, don't, how can I say? Like, sometimes women get frustrated at themselves that they feel like they're not doing it right, but it's their body is changing. It's a whole change that has to occur. And what I have found over the years is that sometimes touching the woman's introitus, which is the little bottom part of their vagina, giving a little bit of pressure there and saying, push to that point. That's where you send your push to. And it really can make that change, and it becomes like a target, on a target board, that they're really focusing their push right here, and that is helpful.
Very helpful. So I like the pressing. This, I feel like, actually can really kind of create some damage, and it really can be sore later, but the gentle pressing down tap in, I think, is really, really helpful because it does give a focus point. And
yes, it
really
doesn't.
is where the parent.
You're not pushing hard on it. You're just touching, saying that's the point to push to.
Yeah, exactly. No, it can be very helpful. And I think one can always ask, like, was it helpful? Do you want, some people are like, yes, please give me, and someone just keep your hands out of there. So it is individual.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So what were some of those questions?
Yes, okay. So let's go back to the questions. And we've got a question come in here from somebody. What are your favorite verbal cues to encouraging pushing in the moment?
Yeah. Okay, that's a great one. I'm a coffee drinker. I'm a coffee drinker here in New York City, and every morning I make a French press. So I ground the beans, or my husband makes it for me. He grounds the beans, and we do a French press. So it's a little ritual at home. So I'm always thinking about second stage. And so I love the coffee press because when I'm, say, for example, if I'm pressing the coffee press and I'm talking, right, and my one hand, and I'm not really focusing, and I'm pressing like this, the coffee's like splattering all over the place. I often have to like put both hands down and give the steady pressure, slowly press the coffee down. And so when you're pushing, it's kind of like there is this, like, at the contraction starts at the top of the fundus, and you are kind of like driving the baby down and then forward. So you want to think about that intra-abdominal pressure, if you will. So whether you breathe in or you breathe out. So when you notice, like, if someone is pushing and they are pushing instinctively, like, say, just unmedicated, just pushing, it's kind of like, there's a breath in, there's a breath hold, there's a breath release, or for about 5 or 7 seconds, it's not holding your breath to someone else's count, but there's like, or so there's a little bit of a hold as you kind of drive down. So often when I think when new moms are pushing and it's that learning curve, it's kind of like you want to keep it steady, 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 steady. And then if you take a breath or don't take a breath, or you wait for the next contraction, it's steady, 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 steady. And then you're following the, you know, the curve in this position or whatever position you're pushing in, right? You're following the curve of the sacrum. Is that helpful?
Brilliant. I think that's a wonderful explanation. Fantastic. Now, what have we got else here? Oh, well, this is an interesting question. How long is too long for pushing, do you think?
Okay, so I mean, I think in terms of, you know, ACOG's recommendations right now is like you can push for 4 hours as long as you're making progress. And I think that's wonderful and that's great. I've certainly been at births where my clients at home births push for 6 hours or more. I find that, so going back to that initial question, like when you push it, like, okay, however long to take the baby out, as long as baby is doing fine and mom's doing fine, right? There's no time restraints, but we want to think about the integrity of the muscles and how we push in. So to be able to learn how to push in a coordinated way, because if you can't necessarily feel, then you want to think about what you need to do until you can feel. So it's, you know, when I go back to relax from the navel to the knees, you want to let go the lower part of your body, relax the lower part of your body. And you may need upper body strength, right? Whether you're pulling or you're holding the legs or what, you're hanging, whatever you're doing, there is upper body strength, because we do want these upper abdominals to not tighten, but kind of support the baby down with the uterus. The uterus is working really long. But if you push in a coordinated way, and support in the mom's positions will support that as well, then moms tend to have a shorter push-in stage. So I think it has a lot to do with, one, patience of the provider, the position of the mom, position of the baby, and coordination. And most important, I think, is birthing people need to feel safe, to be able to let go on a really deep level and let the baby out. And so asking your clients or your patients beforehand, what does it mean to be safe? We can't just say, oh, be safe, right? Because what does it mean to feel safe for somebody? And to really think about that. What does safe look like, feel like? And I think for a lot of birthing moms, they need to feel not only a safe environment, but feel connected, feel like the provider is connecting with them, available, taking care. So I think as providers, we have to try as best we can to create a space of connection. Yes, sometimes we want to give privacy to the client, but we don't want to abandon and leave them. We want to be right there offering emotional support. So I think thinking about that as well, like for our clients, it definitely takes, if something's going on, I will often have a conversation with my clients to see what else is going on that may be holding them up.
We're almost out of time. Another question, what's your thoughts with regards to perineal massage as part of sort of preparation of that perineum not tearing and being able to be a little stretchy? I know that myself, that is something that I would always encourage clients to do. And that elasticity just can make such a difference. And I remember one particular client who had a good sized baby on board, and it was a first baby, and her perineum just stretched so amazingly. And I just said to her afterwards, were you doing your perineal massage? Because your perineum stretched so beautifully. And she looked over at her husband and she said, no, I wasn't doing it. He was. And that was one of his jobs, was to massage and stretch her perineum. And he did a fantastic job.
So my thoughts are, it really depends. Again, it's individual, so it's person to person. And so whether it's internal perineal massage or from the outside. So if we look at here's our pubic bone, our tailbone, and then our two sit bones, I often find it's this posterior triangle, these deep coccygeal muscles that are often, tight and restricted, and you can get to them from the outside. One of my favorite things that I have my clients do is to be able to work on, where did they go? You can find, a ball. I think I lost those. It must have moved. But anyway, here we go. Just a little tennis ball or something. And you can have a hard, firm chair. And if you just kind of place them on the inside of your sit bone, right? And you can spend maybe just 30 seconds and you can build it up and you just sit and you breathe. Often it's really talking to you, so you can go softer balls as well. Sit and breathe, okay? And then you wait your 30 seconds or a minute, you take it away. Often my clients will say they feel a little lower, a little softer, and then you go to the other side, right? So then you would go to the other side, go this way, and then you do the other side where you just put it on the inside of your right sit bone, and then you just put your foot down and you relax into it and breathe. And you could do that every day as well. That's one way of also being able to get to those really deeper muscles. So I'm totally with Kathy on that. I think it just often depends on, there's so many layers. But if the mom is comfortable with perineal massage, sometimes she can't reach herself, so another person like a spouse can help. But it depends. I feel like some people are really into it and some are like, no. But then I think there are other ways to get to it as well.
We've got a question. I love those little hints and tips. That you're so great. You've got so many good ideas. There are, in general terms, with regards to the length of the pushing stage, with the first baby, as long as the baby's heartbeat is fine and there's no decelerations and we're having descent, there is actual progress of that baby moving down, 2 to 3 hours is regarded as normal. Going up to 4 hours when you've got you've still got progress, baby's still happy, there's no fetal distress going on. Absolutely, you know, and I would say my 4 hourly pushing scenarios have tended to be my Pilates instructors and horse riders. They are the ones that, that just, it's a tougher time for them with their just fantastically strong pelvic floor. But we did have a question come in about the 6 hours of pushing. That is a very long time, but sort of just saying, is there not a risk of nerve damage with that pressure for so long? What was the pelvic floor function like after that? So good
you know,
question
that's
there.
what I start. This is where I think, you know, it's tough because I'm thinking about the pelvic floor and like jumping on the trampoline at 65. You know, when you're pushing those hard for long periods of time, there is sometimes, you know, the muscle can get you know, weak. But so then you want to be really, really, really mindful postpartum. Really give time for those tissues to heal and recover, like not to do it, because some people have like a great pushing phase, they do so great, and then they're up and running because they just had such a great birth. You want to pull the reins in a little. Yes, movement is good. You don't want to just be lying around to, you know, you don't want to get any blood clots, but some gentle movements, but don't be up and down, bounding up and down stairs right from the beginning. You really want to like give time for those tissues, because the pelvic floor muscles have the ability to stretch like 250%, and then we want to give it time to be able to, you know, come back together. And then, you know, with nutrition and rest and hydration and all the other layers that support the pelvic
actually
floor.
That's triggered a comment, is that with nutrition, you know, I have no evidence on this particularly, but it's just really more anecdotal, that the times where I have seen perineums not tear, but are probably better described as shattering, to be honest, where they kind of rip apart and badly. I've definitely seen a coincidence that those women are often either vegan, vegetarian, or very slender and extremely diet obsessed. So, you know, like they really have concerns about every morsel of fat that goes into their body, and you know, and so so I don't know. I mean, I you know, as I say, this is only my observation, but it's almost like that phospholipid layer around the cells, which is the fat layer around every single cell. You know, I'm kind of thinking, is their fat layer a little thinner? And that's why their cells aren't stretching in the way that they should for their age. So I guess I would say that take that for what it's worth, because I don't have any good scientific evidence on this.
But it's like the muscle, like the integrity of the muscles, any muscles really, there's always a genetic disposition. And then yes, one wants to be eating like good quality fats and good quality protein and good foods that are enriched with minerals and collagen, because that's really supportive of the elasticity in the tissue, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, we have totally run out of time. We've gone over time, and we could just keep talking, but we need to wind it up. And look, it's just lovely to have you all here today. Tomorrow, everybody that's registered for the webinar will receive an automated email with more contact information for you. But for those who will be watching this way later down the track, do you want to just go over your contact details, Chantal?
Yes. And then just to go back to that question someone asked about the 6 hours, like the more that I work with clients in that preparation, I'm seeing shorter and shorter and shorter pushing stages. So I think there is a lot of value in preparing ahead of time for pushing. But so here we go. So you can find all my information at chantaltraub.com, ChantalTraub.com. You can find me on Instagram, Chantal Traub, and you can also join my Facebook group, Pushing Power Community, and we can keep this conversation going, unless I see you next year with Kathy.
Okay, well, thank you everybody that was here live. We really always so appreciate you being here, and I know a lot of people register and to watch, and they'll watch it a little bit later in their day or their week, but we love those of you that can manage to coordinate your time to be here live with us. And thanks again, Chantal. Can't believe it's been a whole year. Can't believe that we're still dealing with COVID, because with your first webinar that was kind of new in the world, and we'll see you again next year, I think, because we've got more to talk about, and let's hopefully we'll have the borders open by then. But love to everybody, and thanks to all. We'll see you next week. Bye everybody.
Bye.